Hi there, it's Andy Basham here from Crimson. Hope everyone's well, staying safe, and spirits remain high. As part of my job at Crimson, I'm one of the senior consultants in our recruitment team. As part of my role, I actually run and host an architecture forum for like-minded individuals with an architecture background, be it data architect, chief architect, enterprise solution, and it gives them an opportunity to share, collaborate ideas around business trends or kind of technology trends and best practices. Because due to COVID, it's provided us with the opportunity to do what most organisations are doing and go digital with most events as well. So what we've done is on Wednesday the 22nd of April, we did our session via Microsoft Teams, and it went really well. And like I say, it's given us the opportunity to also record the session and share it to a wider audience as well. Hence what I'm doing today. Just thought I'd just quickly introduce, obviously, myself and Crimson, but yeah, so I'm one of the senior consultants here. Been at Crimson for sort of 5.5 years, and this architecture forum has been running for around about 4 years, along with some co-founders that help discover and run it. So before the webinar actually begins, just want to talk you through a little bit about Crimson as a whole. So this is the Architecture Exchange Forum. It's currently 60 members strong. And as I say, it's a great place for architects to talk about, what they're up to at the moment and some of the things that they're currently looking at. From a recruitment perspective, we're part of the Harvey Nash Group. We specialise in contracts and permanent hires for all sorts of companies up and down the UK. And then the sort of flip side of the business is we're also an IT solutions delivery partner for technologies around Microsoft, such as Office 365, Dynamics, SharePoint, data warehousing and lakes, Power Apps, things like that. But I think fundamentally what we're really good at is we help organisations actually get the best out of their Microsoft tools, working in very agile ways. So yeah, Crimson is an IT consultancy that helps clients better exploit their Microsoft needs. There's a little snapshot of Crimson as a whole, possibly a little bit out of date, but still fairly relevant. There are core values, and here's a bit of a snapshot as well of our kind of current capabilities in terms of what's working really well for us at the moment. Obviously, if you want to learn more about that in detail, then please let me know. And there's also another screen of our sort of Microsoft capabilities and the sort of systems that we work with. There's my details about the architect sessions themselves. If you want to know more, or if you want to get involved, obviously drop me an email. We can add you to the mailing lists for future reference. Of course, if you like the content that I'm about to show you, please like, comment, share it as well. And what I'll do now is I'll just introduce Petra. On this occasion, we asked Petra, who's been known to Crimson for a number of years. Petra Val Brown, to give her a full name. She's been practicing business transformation for over 25 years, and what this topic covers is business transformation and strategic enterprise architecture at a time where the shift and the focus may be changed due to COVID. Where does a business, how do they define what their true capabilities are and what areas they should really focus on? So that's the topic in a bit of detail. So I hope you enjoy it. Obviously, I'm more than happy to take questions if you've got any. Thanks for listening, and yeah, as I say, hope you enjoy it.
So thank you, everybody. I'm going to give the presentation about business architecture supporting continuous change, but really focusing on the issues that we have today. I shall quickly prepare a slide as to who am I and what have I done in the past. So I've been working in change management and specifically business transformation and enterprise architecture in about 25 years. And I've worked in a variety of industries. I have worked both as a practitioner, but I've had various roles, and as a consultant, but I've had various roles in the organization, ranging from head of PMO, head of business process management, transformation, and basically at some point realized I wanted to become independent, and looked at my career and said, well, how should I market myself? And enterprise architecture really came out and that's when I really started to focus just on enterprise and business architecture. So that's really me. I'll quickly go past on. So talking about the topic today. So I'd spoken to Andy anyway to do a talk, and we decided to continue as Andy explained, but also to kind of tailor the presentation a little bit more to what's happening now, and how we would use business architecture to support organizations in assessing what they need to do next, and how we can quickly establish that, especially in organizations potentially where there isn't any business architecture or enterprise architecture at the moment. And I do know everybody is enterprise architect here, but I think we need to maybe simplify things a little bit for the organizations that we're dealing with. So I'll just run into if there's any questions. I think, Andy, you are monitoring the chat, right?
Yeah. I'm monitoring.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and if there is, so because this is kind of different and I can't see who's raising their hands, if you have a question, then can you put a Q in the chat to Andy, and then Andy can kind of like moderate and put the question forward. I suggest we have questions at the end and a discussion, but if we have an urgent question, maybe just put like a QU or something saying like, I want to ask something specifically now. So that would be great. Yeah. So I was going to, so I've been looking at, so where are we now? And this is a very empty slide. Basically, this is just represents an organization with a roadmap. We've got some kind of vision. We're going somewhere. And basically what's happened is we've had COVID-19 and we've all transcended into this alternate reality, and organizations have had to react and potentially knee-jerk to make things work for them. And we don't really know, when and how we are going to recover. Now, there's lots of organizations out there that have actually looked at these models, and I think the one that I'm looking now is actually the Boston Consulting Group came up with this and published an article about 3 weeks ago, and I found it quite useful to use that in this presentation to talk through the options that organizations will have. And basically there's 3 options. One is we have a V model where we have an alternate reality and we basically bounce right back in and we'll have immediate recovery. And I think, in my opinion, that's pretty unlikely, especially as the longer the organization continues. However, some organizations have to go back. Manufacturing organizations, they have to go back to where they were. Remote working for their employees is not really an option, and people need to be on the ground and the machines are on the ground. So, however, they might want to, retain some of the things that they've put in place, like maybe some collaborative tools that they've put in place. However, for those type of organizations to actually restart an organization that has stopped ad hoc, what do you call it, that has stopped without any preparation. So I worked in manufacturing, and if you have a massive paper machine, in order to stop that over Christmas to do maintenance, you have to prepare that for about 3 weeks at least, to be ready and to be able to restart that machine after you've done your maintenance. And the problem is that people have just left things. It's gone so fast that there is going to be some damage and collateral damage to actually clean up. And there's going to be changes to cash flows and cash flows that have been redirected to support potentially collaborative working, and basically money that is now not available for projects anymore. Revenues have not come in, of course. Markets have changed potentially. So a lot of change can happen, but they would want to go as fast as possible to where they were before. The second option is that it all takes a bit longer. There's going to be a longer assessment, but we slowly migrate to where we were before. And the key question there is what are we going to do to enable the organization to survive whilst we are trying to get back on track? Because most organizations are going to be facing that reality. How do we continue to operate given that we've got lots of things to mop up, and we have potentially not the same products that sell anymore. Potentially we haven't got the same channels available to us anymore. How do we deal with that? So that would be the kind of U model. And then we have a third option, which is the option of what they call the L model, and that basically those organizations where, sorry, I'm just hearing lots of beeps. So basically this is where the organization wouldn't go back to where they were before. And I can imagine that some retailers potentially have started selling online. I can see it with my husband. He's been working at home, and his company has already indicated that, well, maybe we don't really need a huge headquarters. We might be looking to downsize on this. We might let people work from home. We might need less people. Potentially parts of the business don't exist anymore, or people have been redirected to functions that also need to continue to be done post going back. So that is really the three options that we have. And I just wanted to point out that from an architecture perspective, basically, that is any change. So for us, I think we would for how we deal with what's happened and how we assess what's happened is really the method we apply is what we apply to any change. So I've started to look at so what are then the key questions that an organization from a business perspective needs to ask itself to understand what direction they're going to go into. So the key questions I've found is has our business fundamentally changed? So has it fundamentally changed as a reaction to COVID-19? Have we got now new products? If you look at Dyson, they've started to make filter machines or the ventilation machines, etc. Are we going to do away with the bricks and mortar? Are we going to be completely online? Are we not going to have a shop anymore, etc.? Is the old model, the organization model and vision, is it still feasible given that the market has changed, and what does the competitive environment look like? Which businesses have gone in and out of business. What does the workforce look like? We are going to be dealing with people who've been in upheaval, but also a lot of people that potentially have lost loved ones and a level of bereavement. Given the money that we have spent to accommodate this alternate reality, can we still achieve our goals, and what would that look like, and how would we do that? What does it take to restart the organization? What are the things that we need to do, the processes that we need to create? And also, I think a big thing is what has been broken to make today work. And I think as architects, we've probably already thought about this, if most of you would have thought about this, is that in order to make remote working work, people have just put things in place. They've started using, their own machines at home. There's no potentially security. They might not be using the accounts that we had designated for them to use. They've probably got customer data on their own machines at home. They most likely aren't compliant with any of the processes that you've put in place for GDPR. There is going to be probably culture is going to change. So people, who are used to working physically together and now remotely, that's going to have some impact on culture, and also relationships and goodwill, as in with our suppliers, the contracts that we've not been able to honor, and so on. So what are the risks of moving to any of those three options? And what organizations really need is the transparency and the information, the ability for them to make decisions fast. They need accelerated recovery to recreate stability. They need to have some certainty about the decisions that they make. They needed to be de-risked. They need to be able to become compliant again, and we need to understand what the implications of that. And they need to have some structure and governance around the things that they've put in place. So given that, and given those questions, then what are the key architecture activities and responses? And I've focused very much on the business perspective. And the first thing is to understand the business capabilities, as in what if you do not have them. And I know there's probably a range of people on this call. Some people are more technical, some people are business focused, some people data focused, but this is all about talking to the business, and we need to take a step back and elevate, because even though a lot of the solutions that we've put in place over the last couple of weeks are around technology, the business really doesn't want to know, what you've done in the back of the of the network. They really want to understand what that means for their business, what that means for their cash flow, what that means for their revenue, and how that will, how they can reorganize themselves, how they can basically change the organization to meet the new requirements. So one of the key things is that we need to understand those business capabilities, and we need to use those then to start helping the organization to start rationalizing their portfolios of change, i.e., what are the things that we will still continue, what are the things we stop, do we still have the money, where are the benefits, where are the synergies the new synergies that we can find, and what are the costs and what are the risks. We then need to help organizations to develop the capability to support transformation, because even going back to where they were requires them to change significantly. You probably are looking at a redevelopment of any roadmap that you had before, just for the sheer fact potentially that you haven't got money. Is there any questions, or is there? I'm hearing beeps, so.
I think that's people just joining, Petra, that's all.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. So then once we have a roadmap and once we understand what the options are that we need to go forward with, we then need to redefine projects and programs from a business perspective. And we then need to also, within the context of all that, review of the pragmatic and immediate actions that organizations have taken as a direct result of the crisis. We need to identify and understand really all those risks that are associated with the journey ahead, and bring them, make them visible for the organization. There is always going to be risk that they will have to take. So we have, the patient, in order for the patient to survive, we need to take risks. We test things potentially. So we always are going to take risk, but we just need to understand, what the new context is and how that impacts the organization's ability to move forward and how to survive. And I think the key thing is that we need to keep it very simple, and we need to do it fast. I'm guilty. I'm going to hold up my hand. Definitely guilty. Architects do have a tendency to be quite complex, and we want to show the organisation all different perspectives and insights. And I think we need to take a step back and use the business architecture to the methods to simplify the message, because, as I said, they don't really want to know the bits and bytes. They want to know what the impact of that is on their business, and that's the only thing that they're interested in, I think, at that point in time. So our organizations that have got enterprise architecture better positioned to actually deal with the situation, because I think there's a couple of things. Everybody is now in a situation where we don't know what's going on. It's not like we plan for this, although some organizations say, some people say that actually this is something that you should have had in your disaster recovery plan, but I don't think many people had. So our organizations are basically, I think they are better positioned. I think they are able to hopefully have more information that they can feed into the assessment activities, and they will have some methods and ways of working that will allow them to help the organizations better. However, even if we have or haven't got it, we need to gather really the current context as a direct result from the crisis and understand those pain points. The only difference, I think, with and without is that you need to probably have some additional activities to gather the original state information. And my recommendation would be to only really gather what is relevant. However, from an architecture perspective, so I've had some thought about this, is that the method on what we do basically remains the same. We are still looking at a new future state, which is around targets, and it needs to take constraints into account. And in this case, this would be around cash flow, staff, furloughed staff, potential new distributed operations that have now moved into homes. And we are still looking at, well, where am I today, which is that alternate reality. Yes. Sorry. Okay. That alternate reality, and basically do that gap analysis, and from that we basically look at, people, process, information and technology, and how does that translate into culture, operating model, information needs, processes and technology. And again, I just want to say we need to do that very simple, very fast. So what I wanted to do is just basically share with you the way I've dealt with change and continuous change in organizations, and I think that the method is very can be very fast for organizations to pick up and to use as part of their assessments that they need to do today to help them in this current crisis. So doing that, I wanted to just basically go through the change process. So every organization in the world basically goes through the same change process. Every change thinks about, where do I want to be tomorrow? And doesn't matter if this is a project or a process improvement or a new vision or an alternate reality. Where do I need to be, and what does that look like? And where am I today? And then what we do is we do a gap analysis, and that gap analysis results in us defining a program for change. We then have a choice. We either deliver a project which delivers the future, or we do some process improvement, or we change the status quo, which basically evolves our environment. And we all continuously go through that. That's what we do. The essence, every single project management method, process improvement method, architecture method goes through this cycle, and we do it strategically, and we do it at the very lowest level. And I sometimes take very simple example, saying I've got an empty fridge or a half empty fridge. I want it to be full. I do a gap analysis, come up with my shopping list. And I then say, oh, actually, I had some out-of-date stuff, take it out of the fridge. My fridge is now more empty. I do a gap analysis again and come up with a bigger shopping list. And then I go out and I buy shoes and don't need the fridge at all. So my to-be then changes. So I continuously go through that cycle of change. And for me, the line here represents enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture, on the right hand side of that infinity diagram, we basically have the just do it projects, and that's the situation where we are now. The just do it. I know where I want to be. I want to have my people working. They need to be working tomorrow. Just do it. Just put the stuff in place, put the infrastructure in place. I don't really care what the impact is on today. So that's really the situation. So what enterprise architecture brings to that table, and hasn't been doing that probably in very recent times, is to put a reference architecture in place that allows us to map the information as to what we want to be to the capabilities that we need within the organization. How do the future states link to these business capabilities, and link that to a library that tells us what the organization looks like? And it is that static picture that we need to put in place that very quickly allows us to help organizations map their current situation to the business capabilities that they need in order to achieve their new vision, be it just surviving, be it going back to where we were, or redesigning a completely new organization based on the change that they've just gone through. So how would we do that? And I'm going to, in the next slide is probably people go, well, I know that because I'm an architect, and how do we create? But I think what it is this is almost like an opportunity as well for us to actually engage with the business. And I know from experience how difficult it sometimes is to get the business to understand the necessity to implement practices like enterprise architecture within their organization. Although I think some organization it is getting better. But what I always tell organizations, and I've gone into at least over 15 organizations and set up enterprise architecture with a business capability led approach, is that we really need, although we want all the technical architecture and all the detail, but for me that's pretty well defined. You know, that we've got the TOGAFs, we've got other methods, we've got a lot of detail around how that works. But the minimum that we need in order for organizations to be able to have a benefit from an enterprise architecture view, as in cross organizational view, across boundaries, across process, finding synergies, finding opportunities, is basically we need a static view of what it is that the organization does, and that's in this case the business capability model. We then need a library in which we store our information, our knowledge about where we are today, where we are tomorrow, about our technology, about our processes, about our people, about the skill sets that we have, about what we have in place, what we want to have tomorrow, and where we are today, so that we can do that appropriate gap analysis. We need a process that basically integrates with any change methods within the organization, and we need some governance to make sure, and governance basically is nothing more than making sure that you stick with the decisions that you made. So even, you know, regulation, it is a choice for an organization to operate within an industry. That means you're subjected to a certain set of regulations, and therefore you need to make sure that you implement them, and governance is making sure that you do that correctly. So having done that in so many organizations that haven't got either enterprise architecture or business architecture, I go through, based on my experience, through a set of steps on how to create that very, very quickly. And I always start with this model. And can people read this? Just because it came up a bit small on my screen. Yeah, okay, so I'll go through it. So it's just really a basic model that over the last 15 years in creating business capability models and business architecture for organizations, I've basically used this model, which is based on understanding the organization's value chain at the core, and then has the leading the organization capabilities, supporting the organization, and then we've got the planning section, and then we have the input, transformation, output, sales, and after sales, which is the traditional Porter value chain. And then we have shared cross-functional operational activities that support that value chain underneath that. That's the starting point that I use, and those two blocks on the side basically are the suppliers and customers that are at the input and at the output end of that value chain. And what I've found is, in order to put something like this in place, that 80% of what we do to lead an organization and to support an organization is absolutely standard. Everybody does it. Everybody does finance, everybody does strategy, everybody does change management. And then basically we aren't really that unique. I know organizations like to think we're unique, but we're not. So what we then find is that the planning and supportive activities, also 15 to 80% on top of that, is also pretty standard, or at least standard for the industry. And when we then go to the company specific and industry specific, we're only looking at 5, maybe 2 to 5% that is unique to an organization. And I would actually argue that it is only the choice what an organization does as to how it positions itself, as in, am I going to be a cost leader, or am I going to be a quality leader, that basically determines how you fill in those capabilities, how you orchestrate those capabilities. And what that means is that we can create a near perfect model in a very, very short space of time. I think everybody here that works for an organization as an architect can create a business capability model in a very short space of time. Where 10 years ago when I started out, I was looking at potentially 10 months because the thinking wasn't that far ahead. I think with this model, I can probably, it will take me about a month to come up with a model that is perfect enough for us to work with, and I can even probably bring it down to 2 weeks if we weren't if we didn't want to be very, very perfect, because ultimately from an architecture perspective and to find synergies, the model doesn't need to be 100% right. We just all need to agree to it and use one model. So to show you how that kind of works, I've taken one of the models that I've done as an example to just quickly run through what does that look like and what would I have at the end of it and to use within my organization. And I've taken the example of a government that I've done in the past. And this is basically what a government does. So the inputs for this value chain are political priorities, external regulation, risks, compliance, and they lead the organization on top of, they understand what's happening in the wider horizon. So what's happening, let's say it's GDPR, let's say it's banking standards or tax, what's happening in the country, what are the pressures, even COVID-19. So what's happening, and around that I develop legislation and policy, and this is what I call the top level is what I call the proactive value chain. Basically, they are providing things to the customer proactively. So if I, as an organization, I create a product and I bring that to market, but that hasn't been bought yet. So that's what I call with the development of proactive services and products that we provide and make available to customer, and customers then still have the ability to choose to actually buy that. So in order to do that, we have the services, we design it, we create those services, let's say GP services, and then the GP services are there, and then the customer comes in and puts is sick and therefore puts in a service request, and that service request we manage, demand management. We then deal with the cases, and in retail that would be a customer support department dealing with requests coming in and understanding how to operationally deal with questions from customers. I've most recently I've done this in telecoms. So we then manage that demand. We then look at the risks within that across that environment, and that feeds back into knowledge management, and then feeds back. That's our information about our current state that we feed back into the activity of understanding where we need to be. So we then combine that with what happens in the external. So what we have there is actually a translation of that, where I want to be and where I am today, and seeing the activities that we need to do in an organization to make that happen. We then use that model to translate that to a capability model, as in what are the things that we would do. So we organize that in big blocks first. So if we see their organizational leadership is leading the organization, we have business support management is supporting the organization, and that will then further translate into a proper capability model, translating all of those activities. So what we see, and if we look at these, I would almost ask the room, and if I'd done this in a face-to-face, I would ask the room at this point in time to say, well, do we recognize these capabilities? Because I believe most organizations have these. Most organizations, we all do stakeholder management, we all have customer relationship management, we have employee relationship management, we have HR, we have case management, we have knowledge management, governance management, and then underneath that there's even more detail. But all of these are used to orchestrate and build the operating model that an organization needs. So this is the core static model that you would use to assess your current crisis situation against. So what we would do then is we would take that model, and based on all the questions that we asked ourselves at the beginning of this presentation, as in, is my model still valid? Is my operating model still what it should be? What does the where do we need to go? All those questions, all those answers, and all the statements that come out of that, we translate into ability statements, and we map that to a business capability model. And then we look at, well, what would that look like holistically, and taking into account people, process, information and technology at the same time, to understand where do we need to be, what have I just done, what's the impact, do the gap analysis, and then start planning the programs and projects around that. And what we will see is that some organizations will have a technology focus, and some organizations will focus on the organization design, although I can probably guarantee you they will all focus on revenue and on cost and on how to regenerate or how to survive in the next couple of months, and putting that context in that gap analysis. So whatever that is, and whatever that focus is that through the business capabilities, wherever we start, if we start from the people perspective, then we should be able to link that to any of the other aspects. And that's where I guess organizations with enterprise architecture and with technology architecture, or with a good understanding of what their data models look like and where that information is located, can feed that information in faster. However, not having a model like this is not the end of the world. It is very, very easy to put it in place very, very quickly, and to do it in such a way that you can communicate that to the business. And then we apply, of course, the context around that to make sure that we cover security, regulation, performance, and benefits against these capabilities. So we would then look at how those work together. So this is about presenting the different views, as in, if you have a business capability, so if we take organization design with the processes and the value chains together, that would make up your target operating model. And I think the key thing is that so when people talk about these capability models or the reference architecture, some people refer to them as the blueprints, and for me the reference architecture is actually very, very static. The blueprint of where you want to be is the to be that you associate with that. It is not the same thing, and the as is really the old blueprint of where we were. So I think it's very important that we don't make the capability model actually dynamic. It's all these other models that you see here around it that are changing, not the actual business capabilities. So what do we then do with a portfolio? So if I was to go into an organization right now and said, okay, I need to rationalize your portfolio, I would start mapping the information, the ability statements, so all the things that they want to be able to do, that they have answered in those questions that they've asked themselves, as in, is my business model still relevant, or what is it that I need to be able to do in the near future and in the far future? And I would map that to the capabilities, i.e. what are the capabilities that I need in order to make that happen? And I would then do that also for the projects that we have in the portfolio, i.e. what were the requirements that I had in my portfolio for the projects, and what was the budget that was associated with it. And I would also take into account all the things, and I've taken Project G, all those things that I've just done, and which capabilities have I actually changed in order to make the alternate reality work in the short term. I would then look and see where are the capabilities that overlap and translate those through the aspects of people, process, information and technology to whatever the synergies are that I would come up with, and I would then apply the constraints and the context to that rationalization. So that is what I would do to rationalize the portfolio for an organization that has just gone through this activity. And that's just, it is just a question of mapping that information against the capabilities and looking at where you are double mapping and the number of requirements you're mapping to the same capability, and those will float up and show you where you've done most of your changes and which changes are still relevant, and then what I've done in the past, and I'll show you that in a case study in a minute, is that we then associate the budget. So even if you don't have and most organizations that's not the case, is most organizations are not very good at understanding which requirements they are delivering against which how much they cost to deliver. So how much do the requirements cost to deliver? So in order to make sense of that, I have basically in the past just simply taken the number of mappings of a requirement against the capability, divide it through the budget to see what the distribution of the budget has been across the capabilities, and have been able to find what we think the cost would be to realize those capabilities, and found that we were spending a huge amount of money on certain projects for certain areas that we were doing in other projects as well. So that I would do that. This is a normal rationalization. This is a normal activity that I would do to understand if my project portfolio is actually correct. So I don't think from an architecture or a business architecture perspective we are doing anything new than what we would always do. But I think there is an opportunity to really help organizations very quickly understand what they have left, as in they have that budget and that project G will have taken a big chunk out of that. What's the impact of that on the projects? What are the capabilities that we potentially don't need anymore? So let's take, for example, the front end, so the remote working situation. What we will see is that the network environment probably is lagging behind, and I'm sure that if we were to look at a standard project portfolio right now, and I just realized that, sorry, apologies for this, I've got my conclusions before my illustration, which is fine. I'll do that in a minute. I'll go back to that. But basically, if I looked at a typical project portfolio right now in any organization, I probably would have something like a network upgrade. I would have identity and access management. I would have said that I probably would be deploying some desktops. I would probably have a CRM deployment with like a digital transformation associated with it. I'd have some new services or product introductions. I'd have some compliance issues, potentially to GDPR or to regulation. I have some cybersecurity activities and some disaster recovery activities. I've just basically just made them up as to what I would expect to see. And I would ask the questions as in, if I was to look at a network upgrade, that would now potentially be a priority, but I probably think that the rest of the world also has that priority. So therefore, the cost of being able to do that and the skill sets will become rarer, the products will become rarer. How do I do that? How do I put these in? So that's that kind of an example of something that's significantly changed. How am I going to look at identity and access management. So what's happened, we've gone from organization to actual personal spaces and profiles. What's the impact of that, and how do I deal with that? So those I've just basically, and I think that Andy, are we going to share this out for people to read in detail?
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely up to you. But yeah, we'd always
share, I'm fine with that. So this is just me thinking through that. So that's what I did. But I think the key thing is what organisations need right now is what I said is they need that transparency. They need to understand where their opportunities are, what capabilities they need to progress, and they need help from architects to make those visible to them and how they interact within the organizational models. And I think that's really the key to implementing something like this. So enterprise architecture itself, I think there is actually an opportunity here for enterprise architects to provide more value to the organization, to actually take a step back and have a more simple, faster way to map the organization to an architectural model, rather than all the real complex detailed stuff that we tend to present to organizations. So, and I'm going to go through these too quickly, so I did that already. So to just and I can go through this in detail. I can either open the floor for questions, but I've got a little bit of a case study that I also put in place just to show you, because I can talk about this, and it doesn't really give you any kind of warm fuzzy feeling that does this actually work. But and also to show you that actually this is no different from what I would do in any other organization to do an actual project portfolio rationalization. So, this is a quick run through of what I did in a market research company to rationalize 7 project portfolios across 7 operating companies with each 40 projects within them. Through the use of a capability model, we basically mapped all of the projects to the business capabilities and said, well, what is it that these projects are delivering to the organization, and which capabilities are they affecting? We then very quickly, so we just basically looked at the ability statement, as in not the capability, but I want the ability to sell something to a customer on their mobile, or I want the ability to provide the customer with the ability to look at my products on an app whilst they're shopping, whilst they're walking through the store. And we captured all of those, and we mapped that to a level 1, level 2, or if we could 3 capability. And then we looked at the projects. We had 3 projects here as an example, which basically were all mapped to a capability model. And we then took per capability, we looked at what the future versus current state was, and the synergy opportunities were for those particular capabilities. In this case, this was data processing and managing data sets for 3 different projects related to social media. Where were the overlaps? So this was 3 different companies. So the blue one, the red one, and the green one, they all were different companies doing the same project, touching the same capability. We then looked at those and understood, well, what are the synergy areas that we would have? What will we be able to do from a people, process, information, technology perspective? And then how does that translate into an actual option? And the actual steps that we identified for these was these were the actual capabilities that we had: manage methods, acquire data from secondary sources, creating a standardized analytics models, and managing content. We had basically opportunities to combine forces on vendor management. We had the opportunity to align to analytics, the opportunity to do master data management development, and we then took the number of capabilities that we had against each capability and distributed that. And this is very small because I had to also anonymize it a little bit, but it shows you at the top one the percentage of number of capabilities mapped against the capability, and then distributed the budget against that, so we could see which capabilities in which company, what money was spent on it, and what were then the potential savings of bringing these projects together across the organization. So that was kind of an illustration, and that's the kind of thing that you would want to do right now. You want to show them, well, what are the capabilities that you now don't need anymore because you are not going to be able to do certain products, or products that you've now developed in the recent past that you are going to develop. How can you look at what capabilities you can still continue to develop, and which are the ones that you would want to not invest in anymore? So that would support that activity. And that was pretty much what I had to say today.
Thank you, Petra.
Yeah.
There was one question from Ramesh, actually.
Okay.
So I'm just going to bring up the.
It's going to go to
I don't know whether you want to ask it yourself, Ramesh, or you want me to read it.
Yeah, I'll ask it.
I can have a look. Who did it come from?
It's in the chat.
It's in the chat. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Where is it? There it is. Okay. Sorry, I'm not there. Okay, so yeah, that's a good point. So the question, I'll just read it out so that everybody knows what the question is. It says, so Ramesh was asking, I said it was important that everybody uses the same model, and how have you gone about getting buy-in so that everyone uses the same model? So what I have done with organizations, that instead of bothering the business with the business capability model, I actually only talk to the organization about what it is that they want to be able to do in business terms. And then I map that information back to the capability model and do analysis. And only once I have results and insights to deliver to the organization, I would use those business capabilities to present back to them what that means, so that they will only see those business capabilities once value has been attached to it. So I don't show them a business capability model, that they that just has, as I said, because they'll look at it and go, yeah, that looks interesting, but that doesn't do anything for me. So only once you've taken a project or a context and actually linked it to the business capabilities would I share it back to the business. And that's one of the reasons why I also use the value chain concept to model the business capability model on, because although architecturally you might say, well, actually you can have overlap, it's not going to be unambiguous, etc. That's kind of the feedback that I sometimes get. I said, but it's so much more important to have a model that an organization or a business user recognizes itself in than to have something that works for you. So whatever the kind of like the difficulties are that comes with not having a totally unambiguous model, we deal with those in the background. So I would say, don't bother the business with the method. Just make sure that whatever you present to them has value associated for them. Does that make sense, Ramesh?
Yeah, thanks, Petra.
Okay. I've got another question.
Yeah.
Petra, it's Mac here. Mac from HSBC Kinetic. I just posted a question on the forum. So basically, when optimizing the capabilities within an enterprise, how did you capture the technical debt items across the different companies in your case study, and then how do you address them as part of the project execution?
Okay, so the way I do that is, so if we have technical debt, and if I was to take, for simplicity's sake, something like network management as a, well, actually, I think maybe one good example is an organization I worked for had a massive technical debt associated with hardware in their stores distributed across the country, and they had created a central digital environment, and they could not deploy that to their stores because they never upgraded those machines. Now, if we have a project, because every time they wanted to put something in their stores, they kind of went, oh yeah, we'll just work around it. We'll deliver what we need to deliver, but we won't actually upgrade the machines. So for each project, you actually map the requirement to upgrade or to install something on maybe a desktop or on a PC or on whatever they have in the shop. There might be routers or whatever it is in the shop that they need to upgrade. You map that to the management capability, as in maybe desktop management, or to the security aspect, and you map it to those capabilities. So you associate with that the cost of actually upgrading it, the actual requirements that you need for those technologies, and you map that to that capability. And if you do that for each project, so if you can get a process, and I don't know if you remember what I said, the minimum that you need is a reference architecture, a library, and the process. That process of mapping those capabilities against the requirements and against the cost should be embedded within each project. So each project should be required, you should be mapping that. And then when you look across the project portfolio, you will see that each project will have identified that they need to do that. However, they might not have got cost associated with it, or each project has their own cost associated with it. So that's how you would pull together the justification for creating, for instance, a network upgrade program, or a hardware upgrade exercise that spans across the organization, and you would then pull that out as a foundation activity to support all projects rather than a single project. So that's how I would do that. Does that make sense, Mac?
Yes, it is. Yeah, thank you for that.
One more thing from Matthew Doyle.
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah, hi Matthew.
Hi Petra. Hi. I thought I'd just put, well, and you. Good to see
Excellent.
you.
Thank you. Great to see capability in action. Sorry, so it says here, I'll just read it out. Great to see your capability model in action, rationalizing and supporting investment decision making. Thank you. Given that the COVID-19 crisis is driving necessity to find new business models, have you seen a business capability model helping to identify required skills and competencies? So yes, actually. So I myself come from my studies. I've actually focused on HR and finance in my MBA, and what you see is actually that HR competencies, they actually look at capabilities. They look at capabilities. The problem is that they actually interchange the language of competency to capability. But what they're talking about is competency. So people capability. Yes. They're actually talking about competency. So, and I don't know if you remember in the presentation, in the and I can just actually quickly go back. and present this. Am I still sharing, or is people able to see this, or should I need to reshare?
It's a blank screen.
Blank screen at the moment.
Okay, let me just escape. Let me go to the screen here and just quickly stop sharing and then restart my sharing. So if I do a presentation and then I go back. So I'm talking because I hate quiet. I hate quiet moments. I don't know if that's so then I share my presentation. Is that back on?
Ah, there we go. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go down. I'm going to go back to the very quickly run through the presentation. See it all again. So if we think, and this is the one that I was looking for. So if we think about people, so I've worked with HR departments where we looked at each project, and then for each project, when mapped to a capability, we looked at what are the skill sets and competencies and training requirements that we need for these particular capabilities. And then we would also map the roles and responsibilities against these business capabilities.
Yes.
So that's how we would then look at the skills and training requirements across a project portfolio, and we would actually create training programs across the organization based on the skill sets that people need. So what they could see is across my whole portfolio of in this case it was about 500 projects, what are the skill sets that keep reoccurring? When are the projects going to be delivering? And how do I combine some of those skill set developments as part of a training program so that I do not have to, because you were looking sometimes at projects and you look at it and you go, all right, these people are never going to go back to work because they're constantly in training sessions. So
yes.
So you would look at that, and then that helped them understand better how they would develop online training programs so that people could do that as and when it was actually useful for them, with a set of capabilities that would cover multiple projects.
Yes. Oh, that's brilliant. No, thank you for that. That's great.
And then maybe useful as well. So most recently, we actually looked at we actually used this to design an architecture department and to define the capabilities that an architect would need, and therefore, and we used it as an illustration to the business on how to do organization design and a target operating model design based on skills and competencies within the organization. So you would want that.
Yeah, that's so really helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Petra. Yeah.
There's one more question as well.
Sorry, I'm going back.
Yeah, sorry.
Trying to, if people want to verbally ask a question, that's okay, because that's about people have nicely typed them in. Marilena, foundation projects tend to have issues as the business does not normally benefit immediately, and therefore it's difficult to obtain finance. How about overcome this? So basically, one of the examples, and specifically the one that I mentioned earlier, was, for instance, master data management was one of those things that I think is a foundational program. Every single project needs to deal with data. Every project needs to deal, usually comes up with their own data model.
I do.
and basically the cost associated with creating data models. So I basically just use the cost. I always go back to how much does it cost for me to do this in so many different projects. And then by mapping it to capabilities, I then take out the politics. So instead of mapping it, I map it to the capability, because it's function independent. Therefore, it's not related to the budget. I just basically look, we need to do the capability to do X. It's going to cost you so much, and this project is doing it as well. And then distribute that back to departments allows me then to show by also mapping it to different departments allows me to show where there are dependencies between different functions on the same capabilities. So,
yeah, but you tend to get arguments between the business saying, well, you need to do it first, so therefore it's your budget and it's not mine.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It gets very political.
Absolutely.
Having been there many times, I may add.
Yeah. So the way I've done it, I mean, this is down to being able to communicate to an organization. First of all, it's them seeing once I think this is once you've already justified to the business that you actually need it, who's going to pay for it, and is it the first project across the line that's bearing the brunt of the cost, because that's really what happens, isn't it? Because they are the first ones. So I think as an organization or as a CIO or whoever is responsible for the project portfolio, you need to establish that project separately and justify it in true business benefits. So the way I've done it is to really show how the actual deliverables of such a foundation project have an impact on the bottom line. So
you also have a lot of dependencies then. You have other projects becoming dependent on other projects. So if you have delays, etc., there's another impact. So everybody has to understand the whole implications of that.
Absolutely. And I think this is where architecture comes in, isn't it? I think this is where we need to look at what the dependencies are. What we did was we actually looked at their projects and looked at the start dates and end dates and understood which capabilities were actually related to the same foundations, pulled out the foundation projects and showed which capabilities needed to be delivered to realize what business capabilities going forward. So we went, for example, across the business and said, well, they said we want to do personalization, for example, and they wanted to do that somewhere in basically now. And in order to do that, we needed to build data foundations, which of course weren't in place. And in order to do that, they would have to bear the brunt of that. Now, by being able to cross-organizationally show that they weren't the only ones dependent on that, we were able to actually bring the heads of department together and show them the cross-organizational impact of those capabilities. So it's just really hard to illustrate because I haven't got it here on the screen, and I do tend to draw, but which is, I think, an architecture trait. But ultimately, I think the important thing is to pull them out and to actually fund them as an overhead if you can. Alternatively, I have done it by just basically having an overhead percentage for each project, because that's the other way to do it. However, then there is still the future versus current project, as in if it doesn't cover the whole end to end of that project, how do you then manage the budget together with that? So it is a total independency. So what I've done in the past is I've created and I think it's a little bit based on Gardner's bimodal roadmap, is that we have a roadmap with core capabilities, as in capabilities that every single project needs. And this is where we actually, and I don't know if we can we still see the screen, or am I?
No, we can see it. Well, actually, all we need to do is get our clients to think rationally. That would be the easiest thing.
Yeah, that'd be nice, but that's the same as the common sense argument, isn't it? I think I heard on the radio once a program where people said, well, how do you install common sense into companies? And then somebody came in and said, well, we need to put a person who's responsible for common sense in every company. But in order to do that, we first need to get the companies to see.
Well, the
common sense that they have got that they needed. So I think it is a bit of a circular motion, but I think what it is that we basically end to end went across all of the heads of functions and said, where do you want to be and what do you want to be able to do? And we then translated those ability statements of what they wanted to be able to do into we mapped that all to capabilities, and we looked at where they were overlapping. And what we saw that was, if you look at marketing, marketing knew where they wanted to be in 2052, you know, and supply chain didn't know where they wanted to be next year. So I think, and that's where you get those different drivers needing different things. So by being able to map them and say, well, where have you got common capabilities between marketing and supply chain, which was actually in the data modeling part of it, we were able to pull those out and say, well, when do we need them? Given that you want to do these abilities for the business, then when will you need those technology capabilities, and how can you group them logically together so that you actually get the dates together?
Yeah, because basically you want to build
bring the heads of the department together. So we brought together 3 heads of department into a room. We took our big roadmap, and one of them said, oh, I need to make a decision now. And basically they were sitting in the room, and we said, well, that's fine, and this will happen. We just took one of the blocks in the roadmap physically and pulled it to the left, and all these little arrows started moving. And these people who saw their projects move, they suddenly looked at each other and went, oh, you can't do that. Whereas the IT department at that point in time was sitting there, and we knew that was a dependency, but we'd never been able to make it visible. So if you can actually visualize the dependency and show them what happens to their project if they don't do that at a certain point in time, then I think that is really, really useful. So that's what I've done in the past, is to just basically I would develop a bimodal roadmap, pull them out and say, like, these are the slow moving activities that we need to do as an organization. There are foundations, they're not going to go fast. I've used the motorway analogy. So you don't merge into the fast lane into a motorway. You actually come in and you basically go into the slow lane. You look in your mirrors and say, where am I going? What's happening on the road? I merge in, and then very quickly you want to be able to move certain capabilities to the fast lane. But you want to do that with the knowledge of what's happening, because if you cause an accident in the fast lane, it doesn't just affect the fast lane, it affects everything else. And if you have those capabilities and you can show the dependencies between that slow lane and the fast lane, then I think that would help you show why you need that funding and when you need it. And I think it's about really making sure that you tie everything to those capabilities, not just the technology. It needs to be, what are the projects, when do they start, when do they end, when does the need for that capability in a particular context is required, and how does that have a dependency on that foundational component, so that you can actually justify it.
One of the things I've done is, obviously the foundation is quite broad, and phase elements of the foundation, and when projects need that particular element that hasn't already been built, like say phase 2, phase 3 of the foundation, that goes into their budget, but it's still allocated under the foundation, just so you can identify and keep a track on the whole cost of the foundation, because it's very interesting to know how much the foundation costs in its own right, irrespective of all, in respect to all the other components. So you can actually move those bits in, but you have to be well disciplined and good at planning, and most of them are.
Yes. So I have found that if you can do that mapping of a project portfolio, then you very quickly can get the support of finance. So I usually do try and get support from finance to show them things like how I can illustrate benefits realization based on the delivery of those capabilities. That usually helps with getting the justification in, because usually finance is the are the ones that hold the purse strings.
That's it, yeah.
and I think making it visible and transparent is the key thing, really. But keep it simple. But I think the key thing is that the business really doesn't want to see all the dependencies. What I use are like big blocks to show them how things are.
Yeah, you have to keep it high level. In any case, if you break down capabilities right the way down, there's you only put one capability, a low level block, in one of the main capabilities. Otherwise, they'll be everywhere.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I only ever use with the business, or at least with like the C-level engagement, I rarely go below level 2.
Yeah, I mean, just want to say thanks for everyone for attending, really, because I know everyone's probably, in different situations. Some might be working still, some might not be. I don't know what everyone's individual situations are, but I think there's a bit of a lack of stimulation at the moment for some people. So hopefully that's provided that for you, and we'll obviously do it again very soon as well.